Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 357 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah. I had that issue with my Wildcats letting me down in the tournament.
They did.
But I'm trying to take it in stride.
That's what happens when you're a Kentucky fan.
It does. You have the ups and the downs, and too many downs lately, but we'll deal with it.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Megan Duggar jump out to our highest level.
Hey, thank you. Is like, you think about her initials, MD.
MD.
And if she was an MD, would she be like MD?
Yeah.
Like MD square?
On a briefcase or a portfolio or something like that?
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah, but thank you.
Angie Girl.
What's going on, Angie Girl?
Cindy Hollenbeck.
Hey, hollering back at you.
Kelly Thompson.
Did you get that hollering back at you?
I got you.
Yeah, okay.
It just wasn't that funny, so I didn't chuckle or anything like that.
Hey, Kelly.
Nikki Scott.
What's going on, Nikki?
Rico.
Rico.
Ashley Marie.
Hey, Ashley Marie.
M.
What's going on, M?
Darren Harris.
Hey, there's Darren.
Cassandra LaBomb.
Ooh, La Bomb. Like, you know, La Bomb.
You know, and then you just repeat the thing you said previously. Bohemian.
Hey, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Seth Keener jumped out at our highest level.
I'm glad you left that alone.
You're on fire tonight. This is going to be a great episode, I can tell.
Thanks, Seth. Appreciate it.
Charlotte Upton.
What's going on, Charlotte?
And last but not least, Sarah Parker.
Hey, Sarah.
People are going to think we've been drinking or something.
Something.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Katie O'Connor. She's been a friend for a long time.
She has.
Sent us in a bunch of stuff in the mailbag. We've communicated for years. We love Katie.
Yeah, thank you, Katie.
We also had a great PayPal donation from Robin Taylor.
Hey, thanks, Robin.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. Gibbs, we have so much out right now. On Saturday night, we dropped a new Patreon episode about this guy named Anthony Garcia. He was involved in kind of a gang shooting, and it took them like 4 years to catch him, but it's the way they caught him that is fascinating. It's based on a tattoo that he got put on his body.
Yeah.
That essentially depicted the crime scene.
Yeah, not the smartest guy.
No. We also have a brand new episode of True Crime All the Time out where we're finishing up with part 2 on Larry and Danny Raines. You know, we get into the final stages of the investigation, the trial of Danny Raines, the fate of Brent Coster, and then how the brothers kind of continued to make headlines in the decades that followed.
I mean, we're talking about really 3 killers here.
Yes. 2 of them serial killers who happen to be brothers who acted independently.
Amazing story.
All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am ready.
We're talking about the Kuria family murders. On July 29th, 2007, Jane Kuria was enjoying a visit from her family who lived in Kenya. Jane, her 3 children, and a young cousin who was staying over went to bed and were bludgeoned in their sleep. Jane and her daughters died from their injuries, but her son and his cousin survived. Once they recovered, they had no memories of the attack. And this was obviously a very horrific triple murder that remains unsolved today.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised they don't recall anything. That happens a lot in some of these cases when they've had severe head trauma.
Yeah, and I'm sure their age may have played a factor as well. Jane Kuria and her children were originally from Kenya. Sources didn't really provide much information about Jane's early life, and articles even listed different ages for her at the time of her death. Some articles reported that she was as young as 42, while others said she was 49 years old. And unfortunately, this is something we run into quite a bit. You know, we look through so many different articles while researching a case, and you just find differences in the reporting.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you can find enough to settle on something being a fact. Sometimes you can't. So what I will say is it's safe to say that Jane was in her 40s. She had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. Her daughter, Isabella, was 19 years old when she was murdered. Annabelle was 16 years old, and Jeremy was 8 at the time of the attack, although there were some sources that listed him as 7. Relatives described how Isabella and Annabelle loved and spoiled their little brother. And man, you love to hear that because, oftentimes we hear about, let's say there's 2 older sisters and they like to gang up on their younger brother and torment him, and the other way around as well sometimes. But I always like to hear about older siblings, loving, spoiling, protecting their youngest sibling.
Yeah.
It just gives you a really good feeling.
I mean, there was like an 8 and 11-year-old difference between them.
And so that probably has something to do with it. It's not like they were, 9, 11, and 13. Okay, maybe there would have been a little more friction if that was the case. Jane's nephew, Mark Kamada, did an interview for the show Still a Mystery, where he described Isabella as calm and collected. She was also a highly intelligent straight-A student. It was said that Annabelle loved children and participated in church leadership.
So I had a lot in common with Isabella. Calm, collected, straight-A student.
Highly intelligent.
Well, you said that, not me, but thank you.
But here again, as we often hear, we're talking about people who are victims of a horrible crime, and we find out that they're just amazing people.
Yeah, they're just loving life, doing and just doing the right thing.
Jane and her children left Kenya in January 2001 after her husband died and their home was destroyed. Sources didn't specify how their home was destroyed. However, it was reported that Jane and her husband were targeted because of their opposition to female genital mutilation.
Isn't that a strange thing to be targeted for? I mean, you're saying, hey, it's not right.
And someone decides that they want to target you, hurt you over that belief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Female genital mutilation comprises all procedures that involve partial or total removal of the external female genitalia for non-medical reasons. It has no health benefits and can cause bleeding, urinary tract issues, cysts, infections, and complications with childbirth. According to a February 2024 report by the World Health Organization, there are currently 200 million living individuals who have undergone female genital mutilation across 30 countries in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, where it is most commonly practiced. Female genital mutilation, often abbreviated as FGM, is mostly done to girls between infancy and age 15. It's classified as a human rights violation. So, I mean, when you find that out, you could understand why there would be a lot of people who would oppose it.
Oh, for sure.
But if you're in a country, let's say, where it's practiced, could that opposition lead to troubles for you?
Yeah, if it's considered that you're the outsider.
Or an outlier, or something along those lines. And like I said, we don't have all the details, but it does sound as if this opposition to FGM was kind of at the heart of the troubles that they had. Could it have had something to do with her husband's death? Could it have had something to do with their home being destroyed? And I would say yes to both.
Yeah.
We just don't know. FGM is sometimes done by people who are religious, but the World Health Organization reports that no religious scripts call for the practice. Jane Kuria was outspoken against this issue because she was forced to undergo FGM because of an extremist religious sect, according to Star News Online. She fled the country because she didn't want her daughters to go through the same thing. The Catholic Church helped Jane and her children travel to South Africa They arrived in Boston in March 2001 and moved to Georgia in February 2002.
Well, I'm thinking she probably felt safe. You know, she didn't have to worry about somebody coming by and wanting to perform this surgery on her daughters.
Or forcing it to be performed,
right,
or anything along those lines. Yeah, I wasn't all that familiar with this practice. And I was kind of stunned by some of the numbers and how widespread it is. And the one report we referenced was from earlier this year. So obviously it is still pretty prevalent today. Later that year, they settled in Powder Springs, a suburb of Atlanta. They joined the Harvesters Ministries International Church in Marietta, and Jane earned a nursing degree. So it sounds like, they arrived in the U.S. They were doing pretty well.
Yeah, she got a nursing degree. I know how you feel about nurses.
Oh, love nurses. My mom's a nurse. My daughter is studying to be a nurse. It was said that Jane was willing to do anything it took to provide for her children. At the time of her death, she worked in a hospital and a nursing home. At one point, she worked 3 jobs, but she had to quit one of them due to exhaustion.
Well, this is not surprising to me. I mean, here's a mom that said she'll do anything for her kids. For her to have 2 jobs, 3 jobs, she's trying to do any and everything she can to make ends meet.
And obviously you have to, applaud that type of thinking. So often on TCAT, we're talking about killers who often have bad childhoods, fathers who beat them, mothers who neglect them. We're obviously not talking about that here. Jane was committed to being a good mother, doing the best that she could to provide for her children. In 2005, Jane and the kids moved into a larger home in a nice, quiet neighborhood. Jane's neighbor, Gwen Mason, told the Atlanta Constitution that Jane told her she used to live in an apartment and loved having a house for herself and the kids. And there's nothing wrong at all with living in an apartment. A lot of people do it.
Sure they do.
But for me, and I'm just talking about myself, there's something so nice about a house, having your own space, not being connected to anyone else, having your own yard. It's nice. But, with it comes the fact that you have to do a lot of maintenance. And, a lot of people don't want that.
I would say the other argument on the other side of it would be like, look, we have a nice yard, but somebody else maintains it.
Yep.
We don't have to do the exterior maintenance, and we have this, beautiful living space.
And sometimes there are things inside the house that get fixed by somebody else in some apartments, I'm sure. So there's pros and cons for both.
Yeah, depending on, your personal preferences.
Yes, absolutely. Jane's immigration attorney, Charles Cuck, told the Atlanta Constitution Jane was an extraordinary woman who had succeeded despite the odds against her. She had really begun to live the American dream. Jane's niece, Diana Mena, expressed similar thoughts to outlet 11 Alive, saying Jane was really, really hardworking. She was so dedicated to her family, and even after her husband died, she was so dedicated to raising her children. So I think for sure we're getting a really good picture here of Jane.
Yeah, hardworking mom.
Very dedicated to her children.
And it sounds like she came from a difficult past. She fled to the U.S., and I'm sure she wants to do everything she can to keep her and her kids from having to go back to that life.
Diana added that she couldn't think of any reason someone would want to hurt Jane. The whole family was fun-loving and polite to others. Jane especially was outgoing and loved hosting people. And we hear this refrain a lot. When somebody is murdered, a lot of times people come out and say, well, they had no enemies. They were nice to everyone. I can't think of a single person who would want to hurt them.
Yeah. And she loved hosting. You know who loves hosting?
Not me.
Me neither. I was hoping you knew somebody.
No, I am not a host, not a good host. Jane's neighbor, Robin Reichman, told the Atlanta Constitution that her husband helped Jane hang curtains in her new home. She wanted curtains covering all the windows, even the large ones above her front door, so that no one could see through without getting on a ladder. She thought this was a little unusual, especially after Jane was killed. And I could see where you'd have that thought.
Yeah.
Now, I like curtains. I don't want people being able to see inside.
Yeah, I mean, your house is a little strange. I will say that. The fact that most homes have like so many windows on it, that the fact that you have like 4 windows around the whole house, that's it.
And I said, I don't want any on the front.
Yeah.
Just brick the whole thing.
It looks really strange, but I get it. I'm used to it now. But.
Yeah. But you could see why this would be a little strange to someone, but how much more strange would it be after that person was murdered?
Yeah, because then you're thinking, oh my gosh, is that why she was concerned? And yeah.
Because she was fearful of something or someone. By 2007, Jane's oldest daughter, Isabella, was in college. She was living in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and attending pharmacy school. Annabelle was in high school, and Jeremy was in elementary school. At the time of her death, Jane was dealing with some issues with their family's immigration status. She had applied for asylum, but her request was denied, and she was in the process of appealing. A hearing for her daughters was scheduled for August 29th.
And I'm sure that had to be nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I'm sure it weighed on her. I mean, you mentioned it. I got the sense that, she was pretty happy in her new place
right
here in the U.S. I can't imagine that she wanted to go back and face some of the issues that she had dealt with before.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that was weighing on her. It was on her mind. According to her attorney, Charles Cuck, the judge believed she gave inconsistent testimony and that she was not subjectively afraid to return to Kenya, which is a requirement to prove that an individual needs asylum.
Subjectively.
Yeah, I was trying to kind of dissect that. Now, maybe it's in the words she used during the testimony, because I can't imagine that she wasn't afraid to return, given all of the things that we talked about and her fear that her daughters would be subjected to the same thing that she was.
Yeah.
That would be fearful.
And you would think that her attorney probably had to coach her
on what to say, what's needed for asylum.
Right.
Yeah, you would think so. In July 2007, some members of Jane's family were visiting her from Kenya. On July 29th, Jane's sister-in-law, Pauline Thand, dropped off her 10-year-old son, Peter, nicknamed PK, to play with Jeremy and sleep over at Jane's house. And I remember when my kids were younger, they have 2 cousins, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Either, the cousins staying here, them staying over at the cousins, or all 4 of them staying at grandma's house. That was a big deal as well.
Especially for you and your wife, because that meant nobody was here.
That meant more Xbox time.
Is that what it meant?
Yeah.
Is that what you called it?
But it's nice when, you have your brother, your sister, your siblings, but then you have this other person or other people who are connected to you in a different way,
Right.
and you get along with them very well.
Yeah. I always loved having my nieces or nephews come over and stay with my kids, or, even when they went over there, it just was, I knew they were going to have a good time,
Yeah.
and I didn't have to worry about them.
Well, that's the other thing. You know who they're staying all night with.
Yeah.
Much different than some of my kids' friends' parents. I didn't even know that well. And there was always a little trepidation.
Sure.
If I didn't know them that well of, okay, they're going over to stay all night, especially when they were younger. So the 2 boys spent all day playing outside and went to bed early that evening because they were exhausted. That day, Jane cooked and visited with her sister-in-law. On July 29th, Jane cooked and talked to her sister-in-law, Lucy Googie, about her new job. But no one heard from Jane on Monday, July 30th. And while this was concerning, no one went to the house that day. On July 31st, a cousin named Owen Than went to Jane's house to check on everyone. He looked through the windows on either side of Jane's front door, but couldn't see or hear anything. He noticed that Jane and Isabella's cars were in the driveway, but he figured that someone else might have picked them up to take them out to dinner. So he left without investigating further. By August 1st, Pauline, Jane's sister-in-law, was panicking. She hadn't heard from Jane or seen her son in 2 full days. And it wasn't like Jane to avoid communicating with her family. So Pauline knew something was seriously wrong by this point. And 2 days is a long time.
Yeah, I mean, this is day 3, right? You've had 2 full days passed. I don't know if I can make it that long.
Yeah, I had that thought as well. But again, it's family, so maybe you don't worry as quickly, but I had that thought too. That's a long time to go without hearing from your child.
Yeah, you know, how did it go last night? You doing okay over there? You need anything? But, you know, some people are more relaxed.
Yep. But obviously she's not relaxed at this point. She's panicking. Jane's other sister-in-law, Lucy, had also been calling her home and cell and received no answer. Pauline woke up Jane's niece, Diana, around 9:30 a.m. She asked Diana to go with her to Jane's house so they could see what was going on. Diana recalled that Pauline was in a complete panic.
Oh, I bet she was.
They got there just before 10 a.m. They assumed that by this point in the morning, someone would be up making breakfast. And I think, you know, with most people, that's a pretty good assumption.
Yeah, a few cups of coffee probably have been poured already. And at least here, I know you probably would have had 5 cups of coffee poured already. Maybe some eggs and bacon cooking or something.
There's going to be something going.
Yeah.
Pauline and Diana noticed that Jane and Isabella's cars were still in the driveway. Diana told Pauline to check the front door while she went around back. But both women ended up going towards the back of the house. They walked up a set of stairs to a porch on the second story, where there was a sliding glass door. They couldn't see anything through the back windows. The vertical blinds on the sliding glass door were closed, but there were gaps. The house was very dark, which made it difficult to see anything. Diana tried the door and realized that it was unlocked. She stepped inside and saw that all the curtains were drawn and cartoons were playing on the TV. There was just enough light for her to see a large pool of blood and a body on the floor.
And right then, my adrenaline would shoot up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would for anyone. The level of shock, fear. I mean, there's all kinds of different words you could use. Seeing a large pool of blood and a body, because you're already worried. We talked about it. These people are worried. They have been worried. The word panic has been used. And now your worst fears, if that had even entered your mind, are being confirmed. Something really bad has happened. Diana told 11 Alive there was blood, like on the walls, and it was really, really dark. Diana immediately stepped back outside and told Pauline not to go in the house. She dialed 911. Pauline pleaded with her to tell her what she saw. Diana told her, "I saw a body. I don't know whose it is." She suspected it was her Aunt Jane, but she wasn't sure. In her 911 call, Diana reported, "I saw a body on the floor and there's blood." And Pauline, I mean, I think she was the one that was most panicked to begin with. I can't imagine her state of mind after hearing that news from Diana.
Yeah, I think you'd want to rush in and find your child, but also afraid what you'll find.
Yeah, I can imagine some conflicting emotions or conflicting ideas bouncing around. You know, what do I do? Do I wait for the police to get here and let them go in first? Could my child be alive and hurt? Do they need me? So I might want to run in. But also, is there a thought that maybe there's a really bad individual still inside the home?
Yeah. What am I walking into?
First responders got there within minutes. Detective John Dawes described the crime scene as one of the most vicious assaults he'd ever seen. Jane, Isabella, and Annabelle had been bludgeoned to death. Jane was found in the kitchen. It appeared that she tried to fight her attacker, but was overpowered. Isabella was on the landing at the top of the stairs. It looked like Annabelle was attacked as she stepped out of her bedroom. And it doesn't surprise me one bit, Gibbs, to hear that Jane tried to fight her attacker. I mean, based off of everything that we've said about her, she would have done anything for her children.
Yeah, so, I mean, she was a fighter.
And she would have fought to her last breath.
Yeah.
And I think she probably did. PK and Jeremy were still alive, but severely injured. Jeremy was found in a bed, and PK was found next to a living room couch. The boys had been unconscious for about 24 hours. According to one investigator, Detective John Dawes theorized that they survived the attack because their heads were laying on pillows and mattresses, which softened the blows somewhat.
Interesting, on that theory. But thankfully, that's, they had the pillows or the mattress that softened that blow that came down on them. But clearly it did some damage. They were unconscious for 24 hours.
Yeah, and they were both rushed to the Atlanta Children's Hospital, and then they were unconscious for a number of days after that. There were no signs of forced entry, which further added to the mystery. And I keep going back and forth on forced entry. I understand what it means to investigators. Now, obviously, if you go to a crime scene as an investigator and the door is kicked in.
Right.
Well, that's obviously forced entry.
Sure.
Or the back window is broken or the sliding glass door is broken. That's definitely going to tell you something. But the absence of any sign of forced entry, that's what I'm not really sure about. What does it mean? Because we all answer the door for people. Sometimes I even answer the door for people I don't know.
You do. I've seen it.
Would it be possible for someone, as soon as you answer the door, open the door, to rush in?
Absolutely.
And therefore, there really wouldn't be kind of those telltale signs of forced entry.
You can also make the case that the door wasn't locked and they just came on in.
Yeah.
Or followed one of the kids in.
There's a number of different scenarios that you could make, but I understand why it always comes up in cases.
But you also can circle to the point that maybe it was somebody that the family knew or she knew.
Yes.
Jane knew.
Yes.
And once they came in, they attacked.
And I think a lot of times the absence of forced entry does tend to lead investigators to thinking that, or at least, the possibility of that. But like I said, it can't always mean that, because a stranger could figure out a way to get in without using force or leaving signs that they forced their way in. While the police were investigating the crime scene, Pauline was outside screaming, "Are they all dead? Are they all dead?" According to one neighbor, Diana recalled that the family felt hopeless and devastated. They weren't sure what to do because they weren't citizens. They were also confused and had no idea who would want to harm the family. And I think that's a big point to consider here. They're visiting from Kenya, some of these individuals.
It'd be scary if you're from here.
Oh, absolutely.
But not to be from the country and not knowing how things work, it'd be even more so.
Yeah, it would add a level to what would already be a very scary situation. And at this point, they don't even know the status of everyone inside. Obviously, because Pauline is screaming, "Are they all dead? Are they all dead?" PK regained consciousness about a week after the attack, but he had no memories of what happened or who entered the home.
Severe head trauma, not surprised.
No, I think he was very lucky that he even survived. And the same goes with Jeremy. He was unconscious for several more weeks. He spent about 2 months in the hospital recovering from his injuries. And I think that just tells you how severe they were. 2 months in the hospital is a long time. So some of that, he was unconscious, but obviously he was lucky to have escaped with his life.
Yeah.
Investigators determined that the murder weapon was a long, skinny object that was likely forked at one end. The weapon was not found at the house. Detective John Dawes theorized that Jane was the target of the attack.
And so the kids were just something that had to be dealt with?
Well, if you think about Jane being the target, which I could understand why that theory would emerge. It's her house.
Yeah.
She's the oldest. She probably knows the most people. Then I think you have to go to the perpetrator not wanting to leave behind witnesses. That's the only thing I can think of if Jane is the target and the only target.
Yeah, I was just thinking if the boys were asleep, but we don't know if they were actually asleep. They could just been.
Yeah, we have no idea.
Yeah.
Authorities checked 60 days worth of Jane's phone records for evidence. They identified a number that belonged to a man named Patrick for at least 60 days, if not longer. Patrick and Jane talked every single day, sometimes 12 to 15 times a day.
Man,
that's a lot.
Yeah, you don't even like talking to somebody 12 or 15 days in a year.
That is very true. But depending on what this relationship was, if you're in that kind of
new stage,
getting to know you on the verge of love stage, I'll call it, I don't know if it's abnormal to talk a lot. I mean, my wife and I used to talk on the phone a lot before she was my wife.
Now it's all nonverbal.
Now we don't talk at all. No, just kidding.
Well, that's true. You're still discovering each other and
trying to figure out who people are, and you want to get to know them. You want to talk to them.
And some people like to talk.
Yeah, some people do. I am not one of those people. According to Jane's nephew, Mark Kamada, Patrick was married. So the family didn't think too much of his relationship with Jane. He noticed that Patrick was always hanging around. Sources didn't say if the family knew about their many phone calls before the murder. So once you find out that information, well, obviously that adds some context.
It does.
Because these are not two single people getting to know each other. One of the participants is married. Patrick and Jane last spoke around 10 p.m. on the day of the murder, and investigators thought it was odd that he stopped contacting her after that. When the police spoke to Patrick, he couldn't explain why he suddenly stopped calling Jane. And how could they not find that odd? I mean, you've gone back through records. They're talking 10, 15 times a day, every day, for at least 60 days, probably longer. And then all of a sudden the phone calls stop.
Definitely bizarre. And it's going to definitely put some light on you.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And even more, if you can't explain why that is. Now, I'm sure the phone calls went both ways.
I'd also think it might put a little light on Patrick's wife too, right? Maybe she found out about this.
Well, I'm sure it entered the minds of investigators once they found all of this out. You know, could we have a situation here where a wife found out that her husband was talking to another woman 12, 15 times a day? Maybe she discovered that there was even more going on.
Sure.
And in a jealous rage, committed this horrible attack and multiple murders.
We've heard of similar scenarios before.
According to Detective Dawes, Patrick was willing to speak to officers and answer their questions. But when he was asked serious questions related to the case, he had nothing to say. However, Dawes said that Patrick was calm and showed no anxiety while speaking to them. Okay. What do you make of that? So it's one thing to say, yeah, I'll answer your questions until you ask me a tough question. And then I've got nothing to say. Well, it's easy to sit and answer easy questions.
Sure it is.
And then I think you have to kind of figure out what to make of this guy being calm, showing no anxiety. You can look at it as he was calm because he didn't have anything to worry about, or some people are just able to do that. And that's something we've learned with killers before.
Yeah. It just seems strange that, this woman that he obviously cared a lot about because he was talking to her so many times every day, that now she is dead and her 2 daughters are dead. Just would think that he'd be more shook up.
It would be hard to be calm just on that alone, right? Even if you didn't have anything to do with it. The fact that this horrible thing has happened.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think most people would be described as calm. Patrick presented a theory that led the police to look into the Mungiki gang, also known as the Kenyan Mafia. According to Patrick, Jane revealed that the gang murdered her husband. And I think if you're investigators and you learn from family what Jane had been through, the fact that she fled Kenya, you'd have to take this story somewhat seriously. Number one, her husband did die.
Yeah. And she did fear for her safety.
And the safety of her girls.
But I don't know if the police believed him.
Well, I definitely think they began to doubt him when they obtained the death certificate and learned that Jane's husband died of pneumonia. They began to believe that Patrick was trying to throw off their investigation by kind of bringing up this gang.
No, I will throw a little wrench into this by saying maybe the Kenyan mob had ties to the coroner and said, hey, put down he died from some illness.
Yeah, we don't know. Can't discount it.
No.
But if he really did die of pneumonia, that probably takes the Kenyan Mafia out of it.
Yeah, so either he made it up or it was information that Jane told him and he was just passing on what Jane had told him.
And that could have been as well. The police also learned that Patrick borrowed $5,000 from Jane while searching the house. They found handwritten notes on the dining room table. The notes were numbers that added up to $5,000. And Patrick admitted that he owed Jane $5,000, but was insistent that she wasn't pressuring him to pay her back at the time of her death. So I think Patrick's got a couple of things going against him.
Yeah, he does.
Number one, he's married. He's obviously, having this very large number of phone calls on a daily basis with another woman. We don't know exactly what was going on at this point, but there could have been a motive there along that route. And then you have this $5,000. Is this something he couldn't pay back? We've seen people kill others for a lot less than $5,000.
We sure have.
And maybe there's a connection between the two. Pay me the money or I'm telling your wife.
Well,
you could go, something along that route as well.
So I'll stop you from telling my wife. Yeah. And he also, we mentioned it. The police thought he acted somewhat strange.
Yes. According to Jane's sister-in-law, Lucy, the family lost contact with Patrick after the burials.
I mean, not really surprised there. The family didn't really seem like they cared about him anyway. And he probably felt that and probably just thought it was best.
When he had no connection.
Yeah.
To them really anyway. His connection was with Jane. So no, that's not surprising to me. Detective John Dawes noted that Jane had no significant deposits or debits in her accounts. About a year after the murders, detectives received word that Jane was expecting a large sum of money, but there was no evidence to support this. However, Dawes noted that they could not access Jane's Kenyan bank account. And I was kind of surprised by that she still even had a Kenyan bank account. You would think if you're moving to the U.S. and you're starting anew there, you would close everything out. You'd want to take everything with you.
Yeah, I would think so too. But maybe because she had family there, she needed to leave some money into the account, or maybe she couldn't close the account. Maybe she had to get out of there so quick that she was not able to fully close the account out.
Or maybe she thought, if the worst happened and they had to go back, she would leave it there. I don't know. While Lucy and the family were making funeral arrangements, a woman named Elizabeth, who went to church with Jane, was trying to obtain guardianship of Jeremy. It's possible that this woman was Elizabeth Mungai. The Atlanta Constitution identified her as Jane's best friend in an article from 2008. However, this is unconfirmed. It was around this time, several weeks after the attacks, that Jeremy finally opened his eyes. As an adult, Jeremy recalled that he went to sleep, and his next memory was waking up in the hospital, unable to speak or move. So that does clear up one thing for us. Question you had they even fallen asleep? And it sounds like at least Jeremy had.
Yeah.
But I think it really, highlights the extent of his memory loss. He remembered nothing.
Which, you kind of wish he remembered who did this, but you're also glad he doesn't have a memory of this horrific event.
Yes. Yeah, I get that. Lucy and other family members flew to Kenya for the burials. Jeremy remained in the hospital, and Elizabeth was a frequent visitor. When Lucy and Jeremy's paternal grandmother returned to the U.S., one of the first things they wanted to do was go see Jeremy, but their name had been removed from the approved visitors list without their knowledge or consent. And that seems shady, right? On the part of someone who wouldn't want the paternal grandmother to see Jeremy.
Yeah, why wouldn't you want that? At this point, he needs as much family as he can around him.
Because he doesn't have much left.
No.
Elizabeth had also established herself as Jeremy's legal guardian. While they were gone, she became close with Jeremy's maternal grandmother, who allowed this to happen. Elizabeth eventually removed the rest of the family from Jeremy's records, so they could not see him without her permission.
I just wonder why that is. Is it a control thing, or you just didn't want the rest of the family around him because were you trying to protect him, or was there other reasons?
I'm not seeing protection because I don't know why there would be a need to protect him from his family. I'm getting a more sinister vibe. It starts with, okay, you don't want the paternal grandmother to see him, but then she gets very close with the maternal grandmother who allows her to be his legal guardian. And then after that, it sounds like she just takes everybody off the list so nobody can see him. But what was reported was that she had been inserting herself into the case from the beginning. For example, Jane's niece, Diana, told Investigation Discovery that on the day she was supposed to identify the bodies, Elizabeth told her she would handle it. She presented herself as a spokesperson for the family, which confused them. Diana said that culturally it was bizarre for Elizabeth to step into that role. She was in her early 20s at the time and felt that she couldn't question the older woman. So, regarding all of this, you kind of have to ask yourself, is this someone who's trying to help out, or is it someone who is trying to establish themselves as kind of an important cog in the process, or, within the family, with the ultimate goal of gaining legal guardianship of Jeremy?
And why is that? What's the benefits for her? Because I don't really see the benefits for him. So is she doing this because somehow it's going to benefit her, or she just wants control?
Well, my first thought was that, she wanted to be Jeremy's legal guardian. But you're kind of leading me down a path that, maybe there was other motives as well. When you think about it, Jeremy's the only survivor of that family.
Right.
So if there was money, which we just talked about, the fact that there was some talk that she was about ready to come into some money, well, then who would that go to? It would go to Jeremy's legal guardian.
Yeah, some type of financial benefit.
According to Jane's nephew, Mark Kamada, things moved fast. After Jeremy was discharged from the hospital, he moved in with Elizabeth and his maternal grandmother. So it sounds like those two were okay with each other, or Elizabeth was okay with her. She wasn't okay with everyone else in the family. Jeremy's paternal side of the family has claimed that Elizabeth isolated Jeremy and only allowed them to visit him once or twice a year. Elizabeth soon began selling Jane's personal belongings, her car, and eventually her house. She said she was doing this to set aside money in a trust for Jeremy, but the family believes she kept the money for herself.
I mean, that's really easy to prove, though, right? If she wanted to, she could get out the trust papers, the trust account, and say, well, here's the paperwork.
The balance.
Here's the balance that's in. Obviously, you can see it's his trust, and here's the attorney managing it.
But you can see where the family is going with this.
Sure.
And it's down the road of, this was all done to get her hands on money. In his interview for the show, Still a Mystery, Jeremy said Elizabeth was strict and controlling. He could hardly do anything or see anyone without her permission. She forbade him to contact his father's side of the family. She brushed him off whenever he asked about the trust, saying things like, "I'll tell you later." Jeremy claimed that he has never had access to this money.
Well, there you go. I mean, why would she want to keep him away from his father's side of the family? From everything that we know, his mom loved his dad. There was no issue there. Seemed like she got along with both sides of the family.
Well, I think if you go down the conspiracy theory road, it would be that she wants to keep him away from almost everyone because there's going to be questions. How you doing? Is she buying you everything you need?
Yeah.
And what if she's not? She doesn't want those questions to be answered if she's not doing what she's supposed to be doing.
Right.
Providing him with the things he needs, taking care of him. Lucy said that they weren't necessarily upset about the financial situation. They were upset that Elizabeth took Jeremy away from them. Lucy believes that Elizabeth knows something about what happened to Jane and her daughters. And I think that notion really leads you down the conspiracy theory path.
Yeah.
Because that would be the start of it. To get the money, you have to have legal guardianship. But to get legal guardianship, you have to get the rest of the family out of the picture.
Yeah, they got to be out of the way. And how do you do that?
And does it help explain why Jeremy was left alive or allowed to live?
You can make the case that the person hit him hard enough to try to do some damage, but not to kill, basically to incapacitate him, and that they would have to have full control of the estate and never be questioned about it.
Yeah, I guess my one struggle with that is his injuries were so severe. I don't know that someone could do that and ensure that he was going to live.
Right. So then you think, okay, could it have been something very terrible happened, and then somebody decided to try to profit off of
that tragedy?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a number of different avenues, I think, to go here. And that's all assuming that Elizabeth was really trying to do something that she shouldn't have been doing.
We don't know. You could make the case that she did it to look out for his best interest. She used the money to raise him. Maybe there wasn't as much money as everybody thinks there was, because if she doesn't show full accounting for it, nobody's ever going to know.
But I think the one thing that goes against that is Jeremy being, in his 20s now. He's been an adult for a while.
Right.
So at the very least, you would think he would be owed an accounting of the trust.
Yeah, like show me where the money went. I'm not upset if you used it on me and to raise me, but you're not even showing me that.
As far as Elizabeth's potential connection to Jane's friend Patrick, the only thing linking the two was the fact that they attended the same church. They were never formally named as suspects. No murder weapon or usable DNA was left behind at the crime scene, but one piece of evidence still gives investigators hope that the case could be solved. In the days after the murders, someone spotted bloody hand towels in a ditch about 2 miles from Jane's house. The towels were sent to the state crime lab and a full DNA profile was obtained. Civil liberties protections prevent investigators from running the profile through a criminal database. And I've never heard of that.
Me neither. I find that strange.
But investigators were able to work around this by entering the DNA into a genealogy database, which is another way to find a match. Still a mystery. Reported that results were expected by the end of 2022. But there doesn't seem to be any news articles online about the test results, and that always leads me to believe that nothing significant has come up yet. Because if there had been, somebody would write about it.
Right. We would have heard about it.
Jeremy and his cousin PK have tried to live normal lives after they survived the attack. In 2018, Jeremy was living in Kenya with his grandmother. Jane's niece Diana told 11 Alive that Jeremy was studying to become a doctor. He was 17 years old at that time. In February 2018, Fox 5 Atlanta reported that he had surgery to remove a brain tumor. It was believed to be a benign tumor. The Kenyan community in Atlanta made efforts to raise money to pay his hospital bill. When converted to US dollars, he owed almost $38,000. Jeremy was supposed to travel back to Atlanta for further treatment. So again, if there's this trust, why does he need people to help raise money?
Yeah.
Unless, like you said, there wasn't that much money in the trust and it was all spent. It's expensive to raise a child.
It is.
But again, these are things we just don't know.
But because the way it was handled, it makes you not really sure.
Well, and it makes things seem suspicious.
Yeah.
Because of the way that it all went down.
Yeah. She could say, well, it's nobody's business. And that's why I'm not.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I get that. But at the end of the day, he's saying he hasn't seen accountability for the.
Well, and he hasn't seen any of the money. Jeremy's social media profile says he lives in Kenya but works in Georgia. So it's a little unclear exactly where he is at the moment, but he's likely back in the U.S. In 2018, it was reported that Jeremy's cousin PK was studying at the University of Nairobi. Over the years, PK has had a few memories of the attack. He recalled someone coming into the house, but he didn't know who they were. In 2017, PK was eating ugali, which is a dish made of cornmeal and spinach. Apparently, he was eating the very same thing on the day of the attack, and this triggered a memory. And PK told his mother that the man in the house was wearing an African shirt. I've heard of people, having a memory triggered by something like that.
Yeah, I have too. And it's interesting, he's seeing a man with an African shirt. What does that mean, though?
I don't know. Does it lend credence to the Kenyan mafia story? Is it someone who knew about the Kenyan mafia and therefore donned an outfit?
Or was someone given a gift of a shirt
and decided to wear it? Yeah, don't know.
When he came over to visit?
I think what is interesting is that he does say it's a man. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that there was no one else involved? And I would say no. The Kuria family case is currently being investigated by the Cobb County Cold Case Unit. It's been over 16 years since Jane and her daughters were murdered. Jane was a wonderful mother and a hardworking nurse, and her daughters had their futures taken away from them by an unknown killer. And Jeremy had so much taken away from him, his mother, his sisters, all those memories that they would have shared together.
Jane fled Kenya to protect her daughters from having this terrible medical procedure, unwanted procedure. And it's just heartbreaking because here she is, she's making a good life for her and her kids, working hard, and whoever this individual was came in and just tore it all apart.
Yeah, it's a sad case. There's no doubt about that. If you have any information, you can contact the Cobb County DA's office cold case unit tip line. It's 770-528-3032, or email coldcase@cobbcounty.org. So as we wrap this one up, Gibbs, I mean, I'll be honest with you, my mind has gone in a bunch of different directions. I mean, you can't really say too much about any one person because there's just not enough evidence to really say much about them. You know, when we talked about Elizabeth, I will say some of the things she did were very strange, but you can't say that, you know, she had anything to do with the murders.
No,
there's no evidence to suggest that. I do think the whole interaction with Jeremy and all that is either her trying to do the right thing or what she felt was the right thing
and protecting him
and protecting and taking care of him, or it was her trying to get her hands on some money. And I have no idea which one it is.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole thing with Patrick.
Yeah. So bizarre.
You know, what was the state of that relationship? We don't know.
And was $5,000 enough to cause her to be murdered? Or was it a sense of jealousy or none of the above?
Or the threat of, you know, his wife being told. Again, there's so many different avenues that you can explore, but there's really just no evidence to support any of them. So we're really left with a lot of questions and theories.
I mean, we have some hope, right? That maybe something will be discovered with the DNA. Maybe.
Yeah. And that's assuming that the killer's DNA is even on there.
That's true.
We don't know whose DNA is on there.
And then you think maybe PK or Jeremy will eventually have more recall memories. And maybe they can go into better descriptions of what they seen that night.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been so many years, 16 years. I would be very surprised.
Yeah.
Especially with Jeremy, if he ever remembers anything from that night. I mean, PK did have that one memory, so it's possible for something to trigger. But that's it for our episode on the Kuria family murders. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hi, guys. My name's Selena. I'm from New South Wales, Australia. I just wanted to let you know that in the last episode you were talking about rock picking, and I had to laugh because I was in the paddock picking rocks. So it still happens. Anyway, thanks for all of your episodes. Love them. I'm Team Mike because I love you guys. Yeah, if you're in time picking, have a great day. Bye.
Good day. You see, rock picking. She gets it.
Did you try to do that whole thing with an Australian accent?
What do you mean try?
Because I understand the good day. The rest of it kind of morphed into a very strange.
She got it. She understands completely. She's like, yeah.
Well, it was English. I'm talking about the accent. I understood it too. I'm talking about you trying to do the accent through the whole thing. You have the one phrase. You know, whether it's British or good day or whatever it is, that part comes out.
Yeah.
It's when you try to go further on into the conversation, I think, where you start to...
Did I lose it?
Start to lose it a little bit.
I think I sound like the guy that does Wolverine. I can't remember his name right now. A good-looking chap. What is his name? You're not going to help me.
No, I know you want me to tell you his name.
I can see him, you know.
Well, then you should be able to think of his
name at this moment.
I'm not telling you.
I know you're not.
And we're just going to move on.
We are. We're going to have to.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. My name is Barb. I'm calling from upstate New York. I love your podcast. I've listened to every episode of True Crime All the Time, and I'm about 30 episodes in on True Crime Unsolved. I do have a case that I think you would be interested to look into for your unsolved case. It happened in upstate New York, where I grew up. This case is currently still unsolved. The girl's name is Julie Monson, Monson. She disappeared in September 1981 in Auburn, New York. Her remains were found in the nearby Montezuma Wildlife Refuge in 1983. There was someone that was arrested and sent to prison for her murder. He spent 6 years in prison, and then he was released because they acquitted him or something. There was DNA collected at the site. To this day, it still has not been tested. There are accusations of political corruption and all kinds of other misconduct by the police and higher county officials. They do currently have a running Facebook page that is called Justice for Julie Monson, and it's a group of people from the area still talking about this case 40 years later. There are tons of rabbit holes to go down in this one. There's a lot of information about this case. It's been going on for years. It is Cayuga County, New York's most notorious unsolved case. I think you find it very interesting. Again, thanks so much. I love your podcast. Have a great day and keep your own time ticking.
Yeah, I've heard of that case. I think at least one other person, if not more, have suggested it. So I know it's on the list. We just need to move it up because it sounds like people really want us to do that one.
Did you ever notice, too, she's from upstate New York?
Mm-hmm.
You don't really hear anybody say upstate. I'm from upstate Ohio. I'm from upstate. You don't hear that. It's only in New York. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say they're from upstate somewhere.
No, people say they're from upper Michigan.
Yeah.
I've heard that. But upstate, there may be some other states, but New York is obviously where you hear that.
You ever hear anybody say they're from downstate New York?
No. But nobody really wants to say they're from Ohio anyway, so where you're at from Ohio makes no difference.
That's true. I always found that interesting. That's, I'm assuming they're trying to
differentiate
from New York City.
Yeah. And maybe it's because we don't have like a New York City, obviously. We don't have a big city like that. We have a number of
medium size.
Yeah, good sized cities. Yeah. But yeah.
Random thought that popped in my head as we were doing this. And
not all of them have to be voiced. I didn't know if you knew that or not.
My thoughts?
I'm just messing with you. All right, buddy. That's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.